Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Bulletproof Dental Practice Podcast. Today I am podcasting live from my home office. Craig is coming at us live from California, and Reese, looks like you're in your boring office too.
Yeah.
So, last time we had an awesome conversation with you, Reese, and we really wanted to get into the next episode or level 2 conversation of some stuff. Because we just kept talking and going down rabbit holes on the last one, which was awesome because I got several comments from people of how valuable that podcast was. So tonight it's Craig's fervent desire to really unpack more of the retirement. And the question before we hit record for Reese was, why are dentists having this pervasive problem with not being able to retire on time and on plan? And so few dentists just can do it according to schedule. And so, Reese, we want to kind of go over that with you. And I think I asked you even before I hit record, like, do you have the statistics of the percentage of us who can retire or can't retire at certain dates? So anyway, buddy, welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming on again. And if you want, you can jump right into that statistic.
All right, Peter, thanks so much for the intro, and thanks to Craig for taking time out of his vacation to be a part of this too. You always have some good insights as well. And I think the one thing, if we were to answer the question, there's only a few data points that really we can track that show where dentists are retiring, at what points, and when they're choosing to retire. In fairness to the statistic I'm about to share with you, this most recent sample, there's 2 main samples done from the American Dental Association. One of them you can find on their website right now, and it just says the average retirement date for dentists nationally. This is GPs and specialists. It has it at age 69. So the average GP and specialist combined is the average retirement date is 69. What we don't know, based on the way these questions are framed, sometimes people are choosing to work later and they're not reporting it the same way as people who are maybe feeling desperate, like they have to retire at 69. So I get a lot of questions like, well, that doesn't mean dentists are retiring at 69 because they have to. They're just choosing to work longer. And we just love our professions. We love clinical. We want to have an impact. And I don't want to discount that because I think there's some truth. Some dentists really love it, but I'm coming from a side of, I post polls on my Facebook group and on a lot of Facebook groups that you guys are a part of quite often. And you guys have probably seen some of these questions, like if you could retire at 55 and spend more money, or if you could retire at 55 and spend a little less, be a little more frugal, or retire at 65 but spend a lot more and live a better lifestyle, which one would you pick? Would you pick retiring earlier? Or would you pick retiring later, right? If it meant that you could spend a little more and take a few more vacations. And like hands down, like every survey I've ever done has had people say 55 and I'll just spend a little less. Like I want to retire early. I want to get out of this. I don't want to be doing this any longer. I want to get out of clinical. Like, I don't know that that's representative of the whole dental population, but of people on Facebook that are dentists, that's the sample, and I see it all the time. So I think that dentists are retiring at 69 on average because that's literally the point at which they believe it's prudent for them to retire. That's the point they feel like they can finally do it and not risk jeopardizing their lifestyle. And that's 6 years later than the average American. It's 6 years later than the average 50,000 a year wage earner. They're 6 years later. So,
there's a difference. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. There's a difference. I just got back, honestly, from the Tony Robbins Business Mastery. It was 5 days out in Vegas. And, there was retirement came up, and there's a difference between obviously having to work and wanting to work. And you're right, that statistic of 69, like that's a cool thing to be in, right? Because maybe they're just wanting to keep working. And I think we need to peel out that and say, like, when do you see dentists finding financial stability in terms of the retirement plan. So
I guess just to clarify that though, I believe that most dentists retire when they believe they can. They don't wait longer. Like in my experience, I don't see dentists, if I say like, you have plenty of money right now, you are done. If I give them that confidence, they don't keep working.
Okay, they sell. How many of them are banking on the sale of the practice to be the final push?
Well, the way I calculate it is you want to take someone's total net worth, like whatever someone is worth across real estate equity and practice equity, retirement accounts, and cash and other investments. You take all of that, and that's how you calculate whether you're ready to retire. So you shouldn't be banking on the sale of the practice. You should be always using the equity in the practice as a way to value where you're at from a total wealth perspective. And so usually once someone gets to the point to where they're at a 30 to 35 times what they spend in a year in total wealth, that's getting to a point to where work is optional.
All right, wait. Let's unpack that one just a second. So let's say a dentist makes, let's just make it easy numbers, right? So it's
a dentist spends 200 grand a year.
Okay, let's call it 200 grand a year, right? Yep. So you're saying it should be, that number in net worth should be 30 times 200?
Yeah, 6 to 7 million then.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say like that's the point of when I'm comfortable starting to have the conversation. Work is optional. If you're spending 200,000 a year and you are worth 4 million, it's not time yet unless you're 70 plus. If you're 70 plus.
So Reese, where does that 30 to 35 math come in? At what age? Is that any age?
Any age.
And also, you have an interesting thing that I was talking to you about offline maybe a couple of weeks ago. You said that you like to not deplete the principal. So I don't know what term this is, but I would imagine that, if you're 60 years old and you had $10 million, that you'd run the financial algorithm to show what would it be like to be broke at 100 or whatever, 105. You don't run the math that way, correct?
Well, I'll show you guys one thing really quick instead of showing you can you guys see my screen right now?
I can, yeah.
So here's my screen, and I'll show you one chart on here that'll help us. This screen right here. I came up with this term called, I came up with a periodic table of financial elements, and one of them is this thing called total term. It's a TT score, and this TT score basically takes someone's total net worth and it divides it by your annual personal spending. So in the example we just used, if someone had a $6 million net worth and they spent 200 grand a year, they would be at a 30 TT score. Okay, that'd be a 30 TT score. These scores right here tell us how wealthy someone really is, all right? Because at a 30 TT score, all that has to happen is that your wealth has to grow at 3.3% or more, and you'll never run out of money. You'll never tap your principal if you just grow it at 3.3% if you're at a 30. If you're at a 20, we've got to grow it at 5%. And if you're at 40, we only have to grow it at 2.5% in order to maintain your principal. All right. For a lot of people, they want to deplete their principal. They want to spend money down and not pass anything on. That's a very different conversation, and it's a fine one to have. You don't have to get to a point to where you never deplete your principal, but I think it's important to know that for most people, most people aren't comfortable. They're not comfortable retiring with confidence until they know that they're going to maintain most of their principal, if not all of it. So I like to make sure people realize that a lot of the financial planning that they're doing with their financial advisor, a lot of it's projecting out a lot of assumptions about how they're going to spend their money down and die with nothing. But that's such a scary like speculative way to plan for me. Like, what if they live longer? What if inflation's higher than it should be? Like, what if investment returns are lower? I prefer the chart I just showed you that is just a lot more pragmatic in my mind.
I love that. That's the first I've seen something like that. I love that.
So yeah, it's totally different. It's totally different.
But for people like listening, I would just say, if you are okay spending down your money, then accumulating to 20 times your spending is probably not, it's not the worst, right? I would call that a very basic retirement. If you want to be financially independent, we can't have that conversation until your total wealth is at least 30 times what you spend in a year. And you've got to be really conservative about what you spend. You can't just like lowball the number. Because if you lowball the number by like $2,000 a month, you're going to be off by like $1 million of net worth that you need. I mean, you can't lowball it without serious consequences. That's why people retire when they're 70 plus, because they've never done the math in a real predictable way that gives them confidence so that they can stop working earlier. And a lot of them have pretty high lifestyles and they're worried about cutting back from those.
Yeah, that's the key. Yeah. By the way, that's the total key, because there's guys that make, $80,000 a year and they're millionaires by the time they're 60, or they have several million in the bank by the time they're 60.
Yeah.
So it's really, I mean, we can't hit that message hard enough that it's really about what you spend. And I think the reason why dentists, I mean, this is just my thought process, Reese, and Peter, I'm happy for you guys to poke holes in this, but we have a profession where by and large, we make more money every year as we mature into our careers. So if you're making, let's say 5 to 10 or 15% more every year, that's cool. But if you're spending 8 to 30% more per year, it's a non-sustainable equation. You're going to wind up running out of gas at a certain point.
Totally.
And, I mean, and doctors are the ones that can walk into any, bank and get a mortgage for whatever I mean, I get emails every day of 100% financing up to $3 million or $2 million. I had that before when I was graduating school. I remember 105% for practice loans, 105% LTVs, basically like paying you to take on debt. So it's easy to see how things can add up pretty.
So
pretty
Reese,
quickly.
how do we screw this up in terms of the, if this is such a simple formula, so to speak, like how are we screwing it up?
This is the reason that a lot of people screwed this up, like you're saying, Peter, is they don't really have a clear picture of exactly how their net worth is growing, and they just assume good things are happening, but they don't really know, so they won't make any changes. This is a really simple, let me give you one before I show you this cool report right here. I'll just show you one other one. This right here is what's called a personal net worth statement. A lot of people have probably seen this before. It just shows you like how much your assets and liabilities are, right? And what your net worth is. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
So on the left, you see all these assets, and on the right, you see liabilities. It's just a really simple thing. We've got practice accounts and personal accounts. You'll notice I'm combining the business and the personal assets. You can see I've got the practice value, Jim Javitis Dental right here. I've got the personal primary residence, but I've also got the building. This is just an average kind of single location, single practice with some building debt and everything.
Yep.
That's a snapshot in time of someone's personal net worth, but that should be tracked that should be being updated like every day, just automatically using technology. It's really easy. And then what I like to do is I prepare what's called a progress report. And this progress report tracks people's motion over time and make sure we're being honest about whether we're making real net worth progress or if we're just getting busier. So you can see here's July, and here we're at 5.4 million. And I want to make sure that I can see a positive net worth growth every 3 months. And I want to know in what categories that's coming from. Is it coming from cash? Is it coming from after-tax investments? Is it coming from 401ks and pre-tax investments? Is it coming from real estate in the practice? Coming from business valuation? Or is it coming from personal real estate? Well, how much of it's debt reduction in different categories versus asset growth? Most dentists, if they just had these two reports given to them, a personal financial statement, and they had a quarterly progress report that they're looking at every 3 months, they would start making adjustments because they would just know, like, crap, I keep doing the same thing. I'm adding practices, I'm levering them up, I'm depleting my cash, and then I'm not growing them enough to make up for all the debt I'm bringing on, and my net worth is going down. And I got to stop doing that until I've got to grow the asset more, right?
Well, that's Pearson's law, by the way. Just knowing your numbers and looking at them changes the behavior. Like, if you have a scale in your bathroom, you will tend to lose weight even if you don't intend to.
Yeah, I totally agree.
You know, just by seeing your weight. You know, so most dentists would never see that, or maybe see that once every couple of years if they went to buy something.
What you track increases.
I find that, like, most people will, that's the starting point, just knowing your numbers. That was my initial point. There's a few tactical things that will help big time. We can talk about those next, but I just wanted to make that overarching point. If you don't see your numbers regularly of exactly how your net worth is progressing, I just know that it won't, there's not even a start.
Well, yeah, and how do you know where the bullseye, if you're not getting, if you're not getting a roadmap, how do you know where the roads are, right? And so, I do that personally, like you were saying, just on my own account, but it's not as good looking as what you provide for your clients.
The thing is, I've found that a lot of people are doing it in some form. They're like grasping for straws to, like, just figure this thing out, and they make their own spreadsheets. They're like documenting it, and then what happens is they work with this financial advisor who's like totally on a different page, right? You're just bringing them something that he's selling them, like an insurance policy, a 401k, or some kind of product, and they're like, I need a plan. I need you to track this, help me organize it, help me move in the right direction. But they're not getting the right collaboration from their financial advisor. They're getting product specific sales or advice on investing money, but, like, it's bigger picture than that. I mean,
well, also your financial advisor most likely wouldn't be looking that deep into your QuickBooks to see that you have a $200,000 loan at 6%. So he'll put you in an investment that might be at 4%.
Yeah, you should.
When it might be more efficient to pay that debt down.
You're right. And if they're doing a good job, like, debt has to be, if you're an actual financial advisor, you would assume they would spend as much time on the debt as they do the equity. I mean, they've got to think about that at least. I mean, for debt,
they don't.
Like, and so the problem is the only people that think about the debt are the lenders, right? And so I think one thing I was just gonna share real quick that'll help, I think, people understand this a bit more. We were talking a little bit about spending earlier. I don't want to hit on this too much, but I think the context that you were saying, Craig, of, like, people are spending. They don't really, they're spending too much generally, and that causes that retirement number to be higher. I think to give people context, like, it's important that we try to measure spending as a percentage of your total income. Like, spending isn't just a raw number, like someone spends $8,000 a month, someone spends $10,000 a month. Like, this particular case, the person is spending $160,000 a year, right? And that happens to be 31% of their income, because their income is $500,000. So as a percentage of income, that's actually not bad. Like, 30% of gross income is fine. If you're making 700, or you're making $1 million, or you're making 200, I don't care. 30% is a pretty good spending number as a percentage.
Wait, Reese, I have a quick question. 30% of your adjusted gross, so pre-tax,
of your total gross income. Adjusted gross sometimes doesn't have the full picture. You have to add back the depreciation and the amortization that's kind of fake, because those are real cash flow numbers you got. So your income calculation is adjusted gross plus add back any depreciation or amortization. That's your true income. But that's
interesting. That's cool.
That's the right way to look at it, is take a percentage, because if you're spending 30% or lower, then what'll happen is your savings rate, what you can save, will actually be, this is a savings rate chart. It'll be 20% or more. This person's saving 26% of their income, and it's climbing because their spending is it's 30%. So if you're spending 30, you can save about 20, and that's great because the other half is going to go to debt and taxes, most likely, right? So that's kind of the way to think about cash flow. Just from an income perspective, I think that's important to think about. Anyway.
Do you give all these, I wish, for those of you who are just listening, you're missing some of the eye candy that Reese is putting up on the screen. Is this the stuff you give to all your clients?
Yeah, every month in our practice, we just have a topic that we cover, and that's one of our 12 kind of main topics. It's called elements, and this periodic table that you can see right here, we just cover one of those 12 every month, and we rotate through it every year. And we just benchmark, like you can see from this savings number right here, someone's saving 26% of income. You can see the low, mid, and high savings rate groupings for a person that earns what this person earns. So this is
hey Reese, quick question. Amongst the clients you have, the dental clients you have, what's the average savings percentage that you see?
It's about right here with this. It's about 21.5 right now. The midpoint, just over 21% of gross.
So can debt abatement qualify as quote unquote savings since it's raising your net worth?
That's a great question, man. The way we calculate debt rate. See, we calculate your debt is the mandatory minimums you have to pay. That's your debt rate, all right? But your savings rate is 4 categories of items, which are your pre-tax savings, your after-tax savings, your education savings, and your extra debt payments. So if you're making extra debt payments, that counts towards savings rate.
Education savings like 504 and those pre-college thing, those prepaid college things?
And stuff.
Interesting. Okay, got it. I wouldn't have thought that would be why would that would consider because why does it doesn't affect your retirement.
I don't want to I have a lot of cases where people end up accumulating a lot of money inside of 529 plans, and the kids don't unfortunately ever see the money. So
yeah, you can't, there's penalties to use that money for other things, correct?
Well, I'm just saying that the adult can take the money out of the 529 plan at any point that they need to, right? And use it. There is a penalty, but it's only 10% of the growth. And so for me, I don't want to penalize someone's savings rate, because this is not necessarily telling me that they're going to be great for retirement, right? This is just telling me the measure of free cash flow that they have. Like, it just tells me like how flexible is their lifestyle. It tells me how much money they really have, because it could be piling up in the bank, and we still measure that change in cash year over year still adds to their savings rate. And so I just measure debt rate as the mandatory minimum. Savings rate is where people get extra debt payments added to that. And I just want to know that you have at least 20 to 25% of free cash flow, that if we had to stop contributing to things, we could. Because in some cases, as you guys know, if you go to expand or add a location, or you wanted to take a pretty entrepreneurial move, you might have to stop your savings for 6 months or a year. And we have to know how much flexibility someone has. If you have a 5% savings rate or a 10% savings rate and a 40% debt rate, like, we have no ability to make changes like this.
And it all depends on what point in your life you're at too, right? Like, you know, if you're 30, if you're a 30-year-old dentist, you can take bigger bites for the upside down the road, right? Versus
you have more recovery time,
and that's the biggest luxury.
But Pete, look at you as well. I mean, you're not socking away money into like a retirement account, but you're buying commercial income producing property for cash. So that's savings as well. Where does that fit in, Reese?
Right. Yes. Now for Peter, in your case, you see my screen right now. It's got the whole periodic table.
Yep.
This is just our website. If you just go to services and hit elements right here, you can just scroll down to this table and read about each element and whatever. Peter, in your case, let's say right now your savings rate is 25 to 30%, but every discretionary penny you had went to make extra debt payments to build up your real estate, which is this bottom row, okay? We talked about how much wealth do I need to make optional, which is your total term at the beginning. Now we're going to talk about, do I have the right mix of assets? This bottom row shows me how much do you have in real estate, how much do you have in practice equity, how much do you have in retirement accounts, and how much do you have liquid. And if you were at a 30 TT score, but you had a 25 TT in real estate, or a 25, RT, meaning 25 of your 30 score was in real estate, we might have a conversation about how we have to look at your cap rates. We've got to make sure you're getting the right yields off of those properties, because we don't have a lot of liquidity and we're highly dependent on those properties for our retirement income, which is not bad. I mean, you could have a 30 TT score and all of it could be in real estate and you're still financially independent as long as we got good cap rates on our building. We don't have to have it all liquid. You could have a 30 TT score in your practice equity, and as long as we're getting 15 or 20% bottom line margin off all our locations, we're going to be fine with a 30 TT score that is all in what we call PT right here, practice equity. You could have it all in qualified, which is 401k, or you could have it all liquid. The easiest place is to have a 30 TT score in liquid assets just sitting there. That's the most like control, the least risky position to be in. And the more you have of these other areas, you have to kind of, you got to decide if you have the right mix of assets, if your net worth is diversified properly across all of these compartments. And so,
well, any illiquid asset, like if you have properties, it's all about what time you want to sell it, and everything has troughs and valleys.
Yeah,
hills and valleys rather.
You can't take $5,000 out of a building real quick to just buy some time. I mean, you got to refinance it. You got to wait for the market to be at a good opportunity, which today would be, but in 09 and 2010, if you had it all there, it sucks. So I like just talking about what's your total term score currently, how is that changing, and then how's the mix of assets that you have right now? Where is it sitting between these four categories?
It's funny though. I love how, and maybe this is the obvious that I just didn't get, but like I like how the focus is on the net worth, right? Versus like just focusing on, oh shit, what's my retirement account look like or whatever. Like you're taking, and maybe that's the obvious. Maybe everyone besides me was focusing on like.
No, you're not. You're right, Peter. I mean, everyone is focused on their account. Mm-hmm. Their 401k, their brokerage account. It's like, that's not a holistic view of what you're doing. And it discounts, psychologically, it discounts a lot of the hard work that people go into to build up real estate assets or build up practice equity. It makes you feel not as wealthy because you're not as liquid, but you might have a bigger net worth than anyone else who's got more liquidity than you. I know in my own life, that's the trade-off I had to make. I could have been hyper liquid and grown my net worth slower, or I could have been, gone through a little bit of fluctuation on liquidity, but have a big, what I call PT score or RT score. We have a big asset, but it's not liquid. And that's what it takes. You got to give up liquidity to have these other assets. I just think that's an important point you're making.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to try and I'm going to again try and cap this and not go as long. We kept you for an hour last time, so I want to cap you. But is there anything else that you see that like you see people screwing up when it comes to being able to retire on time? And when I say people, I mean dentists, obviously.
In my experience, I would just say a lot of it has to do with the order in which they accumulate these bottom four types of assets: the liquid, the qualified, the practice equity, and the real estate. That people often pursue the assets that they're accumulating in the wrong order. I find that they'll start a 401k like way too early in their career at the expense of getting practice ownership, right? Gotcha. At a meaningful level, or the wrong order typically is, I can show you on a chart that I've got, but I don't want to bounce your people around too much. The bottom line is that real estate, in my experience, should come a little bit later, and the focus real early should be the practice equity And the practice equity should then be followed by liquidity, and then the qualified assets, and then a focus on real estate accumulation.
That's so interesting. That's kind of counter to what I think Pete and I believe.
It's exactly the opposite of what I did.
Well, it's also, I just think that historically, you know, we're all lured in by the fact that most people become super wealthy or uber wealthy through real estate.
Yeah.
But it's very local and time independent.
For me is like, real estate's the only thing though that, like, it's the only asset that no matter where you buy it along the spectrum, like, it is cash intensive initially. Like, to get 10% down on a property that you're not occupying. If you're a dentist, it's a different beast, because B of A will lend you maybe 100% LTV on the property, and maybe you don't have to deploy capital. I'm talking about, if you're going to build equity in real estate, buy the asset early, but don't build equity in it early. Because if you build equity in it early, it takes away from your ability to add new locations, invest in other less liquid assets, or more liquid.
There you go.
Either way, just don't have the cash if you're trying to. And if you've already bought the asset, you're going to get the appreciation anyway. So just don't obsess over paying down that asset, because it comes at a fixed cost, and the financing's bearing that cost. Just keep your liquidity, build your practice equity, add private business ownership, add stock market equity. I mean, add energy, add any appreciating asset that you have to buy early on to get that long-term appreciation. But don't pay down debt that at any point in time is the same. It's the same process. I'm not saying don't buy the asset. I'm just saying don't build the equity in that asset as early.
Because it's the arbitrage of money, so to speak, meaning paying. Is that what you're saying? Like the time?
Yeah, maybe in your case or Craig's case, you haven't felt the pain of this, but let's take an average GP. Let's say someone making in the $300,000 range, and they have a choice of paying off one building or adding a second location.
I see.
I mean, that's the choice they have, right? It's a real choice. And a lot of times they'll make the choice to build equity in the building they own, as opposed to adding that second location, because they need the liquidity to have the confidence to build that. Like, you're not going to open a second location without confidence that you're going to be okay. You need a few $100,000 to feel like I can do that and get through it and make it happen. And so the bigger you get, the less consequential that trade-off becomes. But the smaller that you are, like, that trade-off's a real game changer.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's also that most, you know, I call it the Archie Bunker mentality. You know, like middle America or you know, that unsophisticated financial mentality is like debt, just to be debt averse. And most people don't recognize that there is a good debt and a bad debt. People equate all debt as credit card debt, this compounding interest that you can't get out of. But it, like to what Peter was saying, and I don't want that to go unnoticed, is the arbitrage. If you're at a 4% rate of return, you know, or 4% interest rate rather, and your practice is growing or the building is growing, then, you know, there's an arbitrage on those two numbers, and it's not necessarily behooving you to just plunk the cash down.
Yeah, like if you expand, can you make better than 4% on your money, right? I mean, that's really the question. And so, but again, there's a lot going on with that question right there. Just like you alluded to, Reese, is what's that person's personal comfort? You know, what makes them happy? Where do they feel safe? You know, and some people just have different risk tolerances, and there's no formulaic thing. I mean, your formulas look pretty slick, but there's no formula per se to set that makes someone feel energized towards their.
Peter, there's no better required savings plan than to make your debt payment on your business real estate. I mean, it's a forced savings account. You can elect to not maximally contribute to your 401k, but you can't elect not to make that payment to your business property.
Yeah. Well, and I just to kind of like restate that, like this is the chart I was going to show, which is just building the equity in these assets in the right order, to me is important. So I've got practice, then liquidity, then retirement, then real estate equity. That doesn't mean I'm going to not buy real estate early on. It just means this should be the focus of your kind of general trajectory as an entrepreneur, is like build the business asset first, then get a little bit more liquid so that I can have confidence that I'm heading in the right direction, then take advantage of the tax deductions that I can get through my qualified retirement accounts, and then pay off the real estate. Just pay it off at the latter end of the cycle. It doesn't mean that you buy it at the end. Okay, it's just where you're going to build equity during your career. So,
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I thought you were saying like when you acquire.
Yeah, that does clarify it too.
Okay, that's a big mistake. I think that's a critical one. And this last point, and then we'll let everyone wrap up, is I think the reason you want to build the practice investment early, the reason I say, hey, go build the practice at the beginning, is because your portfolio here, the green line, like if you have a practice investment that kicks off, call it $1 million in liquidity at the point you want to start beginning withdrawals, look how much longer you have before you have to start pulling money from your portfolio. Like when you sell your practice, you're not going to just invest that money in the stock market. I mean, in most cases, you have like a very short time horizon, and you're gonna have a bunch of cash right then when you sell the practice. And that's the money you should typically spend first, and let your other portfolio investments grow as long as possible before you withdraw them. But a lot of people don't calculate the value of their practice in how long they're going to be able to wait to pull the rest of their money out. So they invest their portfolio really conservatively because they're saying, well, I'm going to get that at 55 or 57 or 60, or in the case of the average dentist, 69. But in reality, you probably shouldn't touch your actual liquid retirement portfolio until your late 70s, and you should spend your practice equity right out of the gate and invest your money in your 50s like you're not going to touch it till you're 70. So you can maximize the return that you're going to get from that longer holding period. But again, to calculate all this, you have to have an accurate net worth and a good personal financial statement so that you can kind of make sure, okay, I spend 200 grand a year and I've got 1.2 million in practice equity. That's going to buy me like 7 years or 6 years, in liquidity, so I can invest my money that much longer. And too many people don't invest their money with the right time horizon in place because they're not calculating the liquidity event from their practice as something that's going to buy them more time. And they're too conservative with their portfolios. So they only make 5 or 6% instead of 9 to 11%.
And also, like it goes without mentioning that if your practice actually nets out more than 8 or 10%, it's probably not a bad idea. It's probably a bad idea to sell it.
Yeah,
because
why
you're gonna
sell?
take that cash and put it in the S&P, or where are you going to get? Like most people that have a lot of money would kill for a 7 or 8% return. Never, So like, what are you going to do with that money?
Right.
Yeah, and again, you guys are entrepreneurial people that have a unique perspective compared to the average dentist, but a lot of your audience is entrepreneurial like you as well. And I would just say that typically people like you, Peter and Craig, you guys have less liquidity and you have more real estate and more practice equity than the average person. That's typical. An average person will have more liquidity, less practice equity, and they won't be investing they won't hire an associate, or they won't feel comfortable adding a second location.
Interesting.
The advice I would give to your audience and the people that are of your mindset is you can be better entrepreneurs if you're a little more liquid. You can be more aggressive if you're a little more liquid. And if you get less liquid by paying off your real estate quickly and not having, let's call it like a liquid investment portfolio sitting in a group of ETFs making you 5% a year. It's just conservative. It's a stable place, and you're making predictable income off of that. You're able to be more aggressive than if you're down to your last few $100,000 and you're trying to make exit decisions or negotiate an acquisition or negotiate a contract with a new.
Yeah, it's the dry powder approach. You always want dry powder. Like
too many people don't maintain liquidity at that level they should. So anyway.
Well, Reese, man, you dropped. That's just so much there. I'm gonna actually have to rewatch this again because I was looking at your charts and kind of going down my own mental rabbit holes, and I said I'm gonna have to watch the podcast again. But man, you're just awesome. I'm so glad that you're actually coming to the summit and we're getting to spend some time with you and kind of just keep especially for our attendees and such for the summit attendees to have, because you're really just a great asset for the profession, man. And I love, since you're focused on just dentistry, you've really developed a formula to help us out, because we are great at what we do, but sometimes not great at money management, sometimes not great at strategy to retire. So I appreciate and commend you for what you're doing for us as a whole.
Well, you guys are doing great work too. I really appreciate having me on. Both you and Craig are good examples of entrepreneurs that are really pushing the envelope and trying to manage your money the right way too. And I just respect it a lot and appreciate the message and the opportunity. So we'll look forward to seeing you guys at Summit.
Yeah, we'll see you in less than 2 months.
Hey, but, Pete, quick plug. How many spots we have left? I know
we have 9. I think we have less. Well, last week it was 19, so we only got about 19 spots left for the summit.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, it'll definitely sell out before, so don't delay on that if that's something that you want to go to for sure. But anyway, Reese, thanks for taking the time again, pal. Craig, thanks for finding a quiet corner in
Universal
Hollywood
Studios,
Hills,
Los Angeles.
Universal
the kids
Studios.
Running around.
And we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Reese.
Thanks, guys.
All right,
Take care, guys. Thank you.